This week we have one of the most unusual and fascinating stories we've come across in a while. It's the story of a woman who made her fortune breaking just about every expectation set for her in an industry dominated by men and muscle power. It's the story of Nannie Kelly Wright. And that's another one of the stories of Appalachia.
Well, Steve, I have to admit, I've not heard of Nannie Kelly Wright. I think mostly she's born in Kentucky, but I don't know that much about her whatsoever. But this sounds like it's going to be a very interesting podcast.
Yeah, it is going to be one, and she is from Kentucky. A listener, as this is going to be more common, is who clued us in on this woman.
Okay.
And I hadn't heard much about her. I hadn't really heard anything about her until I looked into the story, and it's a good one. So,
okay.
Rod, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. Well, Nannie Kelly Wright, or as she was born, Nannie Scott Honschel, came into the world in Catlettsburg, Kentucky back in 1856. And she would go on to become one of the very few female iron masters in the United States. Now, Rod, think about that for a minute. We're not talking about someone working in the office or handling paperwork or even directing others to do the job. We're talking about a woman who ran a blast furnace, oftentimes physically helping the men run the furnace and make iron and steel.
Wow.
Yeah, that's in the 1800s in the Ohio Valley around Ironton. Now, it was a job so dirty, so dangerous, and so industrial, most folks couldn't even imagine a woman doing it.
Well, Nannie was the daughter of Catlettsburg, Kentucky legend Captain Washington Honschel, also known as Wash. Wash Honschel was the riverman of the Ohio Valley, and we're talking about a guy who had his hand in steamboats up and down the Ohio River. If it floated, well, it made money, and chances are that Wash Honschel had a stake in it. He started running several steamboats around 1851 or 1852, working first on a boat called the Relief. Later, he had several partners launched what came to be known as the White Collar Line, a steamboat company that got its name because every one of their boats had two white rings painted on each smokestack. Now, the line that ran between Cincinnati, Portsmouth, Pomeroy, and Big Sandy, real river cities. And Wash wasn't just steering boats either. He was one of its biggest investors. Eventually, he became the general manager of the entire operation.
Now, Rod, Wash Honschel ended up with a financial interest in more steamboats than probably any other man on the Ohio River. And it wasn't just steamboats. He diversified, as they say, into other businesses. He co-founded the Red Barge Line, a towboat company, and had ties to the Bellefonte Iron Works and the First National Bank in Ironton, Ohio. So young Nannie Honschel grew up learning about building businesses, travel, and acquiring power, not to mention a whole lot of river talk. She traveled constantly as a kid, going up and down the Ohio River with her father, and, well, that experience was an excellent preparation for the life that she was going to lead.
Well, that it did, Steve, as it gave her a sense of independence and curiosity and drive to succeed that, well, it carried her for the rest of her life. She wasn't afraid to move, to act, or to take on what others thought was out of bounds for a woman. On October 8th, 1879, Nannie married Lindsay Kelly, a state senator and the son of a pig iron magnate, becoming Nannie Kelly. Lindsay, in addition to being a politician and pig iron heir, owned and operated Center Furnace, a charcoal iron furnace in Lawrence County, Ohio. Nannie and Lindsay's marriage wasn't just a union of two young people, it was also a merging of two industrial families. And Nannie was a full partner in helping them to run Center Furnace, especially when Lindsay was in Dayton on state business.
And together they had one son, named after his father, Lindsay Jr. Sadly, the younger Lindsay was sick most of his life, battling rheumatism. His parents sent him to spend time in Texas as a boy, hoping the dry air might help. But he passed away young, just 20 years old in 1904, only a year after his father had died from pneumonia. That double loss rocked Nannie to her core. For a while after her son died, she stepped back from the iron business for a while, leaving its day-to-day operations in her employees' capable hands, and she began to travel. And it appears that travel was what she needed to get her life back on track after her personal losses. Instead of just settling down and living quietly, Nannie was now circling the globe, going to many interesting places.
Well, Steve, she had already taken a world tour in 1898, and after her husband and son died, she did it again in 1906. Then she did it a third time in 1913, and by the time she was done, she had crossed the Atlantic 14 times by boat, not by airplane, but by boat. Now, that's wild, especially at a time when travel like that was anything but ordinary. But get this. On one of those trips, she was even presented to the court of St. James during the reign of King Edward VII, meeting the king himself. Now, that's about as high society gets, if we want to call it that. In her travels, she became utterly fascinated by European castles. So, Nannie got it in her head. She wanted to build one back home in Ironton, Ohio.
She was so serious, Rod, she actually had her house picked up and physically moved across the street to make room for said castle. But, like a lot of dreams, that one never came to be. The land ended up being sold and a Catholic high school was built there instead. But the desire for an Appalachian castle notwithstanding, here, folks, is where things really heat up. Literally. Over the years, Nannie Kelly had rolled up her sleeves to run the family business, Center Furnace. And by running the business, we mean running everything involved in the business, don't we, Rod?
Yes, we do, Steve, because she didn't run it by sitting behind an expensive desk in a fancy office on the top floor, smoking cigars or cigarettes or anything like that. She managed that furnace personally. She oversaw renovations. She hired workers and even went down to the furnace floor to work right alongside the men. Now, this was not something genteel society expected from a woman in the early 1900s. Oh, no. But Nannie? She didn't care, because some folks even spread rumors that she dressed like a man when she worked the furnace. Oh, heaven forbid. Probably because they couldn't process a woman doing what she did. She always denied it, but she was doing a job no one expected her to even understand, let alone master.
And master that job she did. She learned the ins and outs of the iron trade, and she wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. She traveled every week to Cincinnati to keep the business profitable while also inspecting employee housing and company property back home. And keep in mind, this was during a time when the country was facing real economic hardship. Jobs were scarce, but Nannie was hiring. She made sure her workers had housing and that the operation kept going. Now, during the Spanish-American War, Center Furnace became one of the first companies in the country to produce and ship iron by rail, cutting costs for the company and getting its products to market quicker.
On top of that, she inherited a seat on the board of the Kelly Nail and Iron Company in Ironton on her husband's death. But the iron industry, like a lot of things, had its peaks, and they also had its valleys. As the market declined, the Ohio State Journal described her living out in the furnace region in a primitive house, still mining ore and limestone, still roughing it, but always hopeful. And she was also full of energy and charm. She kept up her friendships, kept dreaming, kept working to build, and she did. Not long after the turn of the century, she was thought to be the richest woman in the world, second only to Queen Victoria. And you know what, Steve? That ain't too bad for a woman from Catlettsburg, Kentucky.
Oh, no, it's not. But, Rod, in 1906, Nannie made another unexpected move, this time of a personal nature. She married Daniel Gregory Wright, a big name in Philadelphia finance, and, yes, 21 years younger than her. She was 50, he was 29. And that same year, she sold Center Furnace to the Superior Portland Cement Company and cashed the largest check ever deposited in her bank up to that time, $100,000. Now, if you're wondering, that'd be, well, over $3 million today. Not exactly pocket change. She also ruffled a few feathers by publicly backing President Theodore Roosevelt's antitrust legislation, a bold stance that didn't sit well with everyone in the business world that she was in.
Was that when Roosevelt was a member of the Bull Moose Party?
No, that would have been well before
Well
that.
before that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to double check on that because I knew he had some antitrust issues about some things, but I didn't know if it was something that carried over into the Bull Moose Party days and everything when he ran and was unsuccessful. But like everything else in life, Steve, the second marriage did not go quietly. In 1919, Nannie and Daniel divorced, and in a twist, that shocked the region. He asked for alimony. Well, question though, if we call an older woman today a cougar, what did they call them back in the 1900s?
I have no idea. Ron.
I don't know either. I would probably put wildcat on that or something, but I really don't know. But that was kind of unheard of back in that day. And like a lot of people say of today, it's kind of, well, cougarish. Well, anyway, yeah, you heard that right. He asked for alimony, and he wanted her to pay him. He claimed he was owed $41,700, which today would be roughly about $750,000. And this wasn't some quiet courtroom affair either. It was a full-blown social event. Now, minus social media today, but bankers, lawyers, ministers, even household staff were called to testify. Hey, it read like a who's who of high society. But after all the testimony was done, Daniel dropped his contest, and the court ordered Nannie to pay just $300. And even that went straight to the cement company to help cover a debt he owed them.
I have that answer to your question.
Okay.
They call them smart.
Oh, okay. I get you now. Okay.
Yeah, well, anyway, Nannie walked away, reputation intact, ready for the next phase of her life. For a time, her life rolled on like always, during the Roaring '20s. Little did she know that times were soon to be the worst she'd ever seen in her life. For in October 1929, the stock market crashed, and along with the crash went the fortunes of many wealthy people across the country, including Nannie Wright. But Rod, she didn't end up in poverty. You see, not all of her holdings were in businesses or stocks and bonds. She had quite a bit of disposable income over the years, namely in fine jewelry, earrings, necklaces, brooches, rings, etc., and she managed to live out her later years selling off pieces one at a time of her massive jewelry collection, just enough to stay comfortable.
And, Steve, she died peacefully in 1946 at the age of 90 years old in her room at the Hotel Martin in Ironton, Ohio, after a life that was anything but quiet, forging her own path in iron and steel, no less.
You know, this is a woman way ahead of her time.
Yes.
She just decided I can do whatever I want to do and am able to do, and by golly, she just did it.
Yeah, and especially in the 1800s and going into the early part of the 20th century, women didn't wear breeches. They might ride, or they might have riding pants if they went out and rode a horse or something like that, if they were, the rich upper class. But you just didn't wear breeches and go to work in the foundry or the iron, the place. Yeah. You didn't do that sort of stuff. I mean, that was unheard of. And, she kind of just, what was it, the old Shakespeare thing of putting the thumb up to the teeth and kind of going, pop it, real quick. That was kind of her little, thing of, get away from me. I don't care what you say about it. I'm going to do it anyway.
Well, it's kind of like if it's good enough for my employees to do this, it's good enough for me to do this, and I'm no better than they are. And, that's a really good viewpoint to take on that.
It's a great story. I mean, it's one of these of, we look at things and Some people might say it's a women's liber story, but no, I think it's just being an independent woman altogether, showing you don't need a man to be able to make a fortune out of things. You can do it on your own.
Yeah, that's true. And that, folks, is the story of Nannie Kelly Wright, one of the most remarkable women Appalachia ever produced, and another one of the stories of Appalachia. Thanks for listening. Now, if you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe to the Stories Podcast. You'll find our audio version on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we're also on YouTube, and we ask you to give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment if you don't mind. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.